three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, a mystical Persian poet, befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong, because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Hafiz, Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Bar Meher Baba ki jai. So we were at part five of the book, and we barely finished the first stanza. So we'll continue from that point. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Once men sang purely in the work of their hands, in the speech of their mouths. They knew that Avatar and the perfect masters were the only God on earth, and that the saints were doors to him. By God, men lived, and his name wrought their works. They went not out to labor, nor sat down to meat, without song attending. The leftover scraps from their singing we have gathered into our galleries and libraries to worship or stare at. Then spirit faltered, losing its way somewhat in the darkening lanes of the blood. And Siva gave a new scripture, his knees, besieged by lovely Parvati for men's easement, set a new light in the ingle in their cottages, gave a new calling for their speech to call in their hearts. So he starts the journey of the avatar here, part five. So what he says is the association is heavily with art, like we saw in the title. So what he's trying to say here is men were once singing purely in the work of their hands. What they did with their hands was the art. What they did with their mouths was the speech. And they spent a lot of time with that, and they created a lot of beautiful objects of art. And God was very much a part of it. And this, he says here, the avatar and the perfect masters were the only God on the earth, and that the saints were door to him. By God, men lived, and his name wrought their works. They went not out to labor, nor sat down to meat, without song attending. So, without a reference to God, song here refers to art, which is talking about God. Without a song or without art, which was referring to God, they never did work or never started eating or sat down to eat. What we see today in the galleries and libraries, the books and the pieces of art, are nothing but leftover scraps from their singing. That's how brutal Francis is on the quality of the art that survives today. Then spirit faltered, losing its way somewhat in the darkening lanes of the blood. Then it's basically the need for the avataric advent as the spirit falters. So the spirit faltered, losing its way somewhat in the darkening lanes of the blood. And Shiva gave a new scripture, his knees besieged by lovely Parvati for men's easement, set a new light in the ingle in their cottages and gave a new calling for their speech to call in their hearts. So he again plays the theme of Shiva being the first avatar. So that's how. Any idea why he's using his knees besieged by lovely Parvati?
Look, this whole, poetry, when you're writing poetry, you have to use a lot of rhetoric.
Correct.
Okay. And see, Shiva, Parvati, these are all symbolic images to represent certain spiritual attributes. So they need to be kind of decorated for layman people into, it's like playing with dolls, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
initially, when people need to be attracted to spirituality, you need to give them this kind of analogies and stuff like that, right? Brahma, Vishnu,
Yeah.
Shiva. We don't know whether they exist or whether they are in different, planes of consciousness. But we know that in the seventh plane there is only one self. So I think sometimes you have to overlook this and just read it without going into too much of literal meaning, because he's a poet.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I think
And I
there is
don't
the
think he
concept
knows
of.
much about, he doesn't know much about Hindu mythology. As far as I'm concerned, Westerners try to interpret Hindu mythology without being born in a Hindu culture, and
Which is
they
very
give their
tough.
own
Yeah.
interpretation.
Absolutely. In fact, even we found that we observed that with Ward, right? There are places where in this. Anyway, so I agree. Let's just continue.
The other point is many of the pictures that we see, Parvati is sitting on the lap of Shiva also. So it may be something
Maybe
to
that's the
allude to that.
visualization. Yeah, yeah. Just give me 1 second. I need to take a break. Anybody wants to continue?
Ah,
Mama, why don't you read the next stanza? Yeah.
okay. Shone in their hearts in again brightness, lit in their hearts the way of sacrifice, revealing the ever friendliness of God, shot with his shining arrows into the darkness, establishing a new sun wherever each pierces the dark. How do I move? Yes, you come back. Okay. Brought into their hearts again music, taught pity, showed them the pilgrim route, and gave them the bride poverty. In Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad, he was clustered closely, but a long time from Muhammad to now, Baba, 1400 years. Muhammad art lasted 1,000 years of it. For the last 400 years, wrought, drought, the signs of self dumped in favor of star measurements and behavior of atoms, the singing of avatars' deeds, replaced by soul's sprawl, hugged in tightness to itself. Yes. So it's a sort of a journey on the descent of avatars, one after the other, and coming to the present age, I think.
Correct. 1 second.
I have a question here that, as we all know, that every time the avatar comes, he brings a new spring tide of creation and makes spirituality very simple. For example, Baba's main theme is love and selfless service. Now, we have seen with Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, and I always used to wonder why nobody asked this question to Baba, that why did the Muslim invaders, try to convert everybody when they were supposed to be the followers of Prophet Muhammad? And what was the need of converting everybody? So, what we are seeing is that, as Baba said, after 100 years of his dropping his body, he will be available in his formless aspect as significant as he was in physical form. But after that, the energy starts to dissipate, which I call like the law of thermodynamics, entropy. And what we see is in every different prophets. When you take Prophet Muhammad, you see the Shiite and Sunnis, and then many other branches, the Wahhabis and all that, and the desecration of what the Prophet actually talked about. Even with this recent political thing that happened in India, where this lady Nupur Sharma, there was no need for her to mention that, knowing that would have, created strife. And we have also seen with Christianity, we understand that till the first 500 years, reincarnation was accepted, but then they changed the Bible or whatever. And this book I have sent you, Masters from the East, is very interesting, where it talks a lot about Christ consciousness. Really a lot of things that I read there is very much like Baba. And we have seen, even with Christianity, the different schools of thought, Baptists and so on. Even with Buddhists, we have seen that. Even with Rama and Krishna, we have seen like, and even with Advaita philosophy and so on and so forth, which I think is good because it kind of customizes to people's requirements, but it leads to a lot of confusion. So I think that even when he says 1,000 years of something and then 400 years of drought, I don't think it was 400 years of drought. It was more than that. Probably after the first 200, 300 years,
Good point.
when yeah. So it's a longer time. So I kind of wonder what is he trying to talk about? In fact, he should have been asked to give an interpretation of all these stanzas that he wrote, because he only understands why he wrote that way, right? So that is my take on. See, I didn't want to read this, to be very frank with you. It was because other people wanted. Because I was more interested in finishing all the Baba literature, Life at its Best, and many of the other literature. So
Mhm.
even though Baba said that this is a great thing and everybody will read it in the future, I think he wanted to make Francis feel good, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, Jai Baba.
Yeah, that's. I think. I mean, I don't think Baba uses any words without a purpose, and it has its meaning in time. And I think this is a journey that I still think will be uh, um, worth our course. Is my opinion. But I
I
understand that
mean, tell
there's a
me
lot of.
what tell me something. What is new have you learned from this? If you can, educate me on that. I am not,
Oh,
frankly. I'm just, yeah.
no,
I
no,
mean, I
good
would like
question,
to
right?
say, yeah.
So absolutely good question, right? So there is no concept that's unveiled newly, right? So Baba, I believe, has said most of it in what in DAGs, right? So it's all that has to be said is with the messages and DAGs. So if you're talking about what is new here, firstly, Francis is not here to give a new message. Francis has been tasked to do something, and given the effort that's gone into it, and given the contrasting that he does with other religions, other periods, historical aspects, there's a journey to be enjoyed as being a part of Baba community. That's the way I look at it, and I think if you think God speaks is science, this is art, right? This is art in the Baba world. Right? I mean, a very crude classification, but I have enjoyed this journey of reading a Baba poetry. Right? Okay. Anyway, let's continue.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
After Zarathustra, the light purely again in men's eyes, brightly between lovers and above the marriage bed, and in conversation and contracts. After Abraham, the settled life in obedience to God's voice, consequently, friendship between men who had what to fear from whom. The tent pitched or struck at his word, I do not bow down before that which rises and sets. After the wanderings of Rama and Sita and Lakshman, the pure dignity of women established, and brotherliness without jealousy. Mind, Hanuman, delighting in service, delighting in solitary meditation and uninterrupted repetition of God's name. Shining arrows flying into the sun in the empyrean of heart. Each Rama answered by, "Here am I." Love's dialogue. So he's talking about the Abrahamic.
Karthik, we are not seeing the text.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Can I see it now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it's after Zarathustra. He's talking about light purely again in men's eyes between lovers and above the marriage bed, and in conversation and contracts. So the focus goes away. And after Abraham, the settled life in obedience to God's voice, consequently, friendship between men who had what to fear from whom. The tent pitched or struck at his word. So the whole group moved or raised based on the word from Christ. And he says, I do not bow down before that which rises and sets. Is this a reference to the sun and not being actually people that are deifying the sun and the moon? I don't know, maybe. After the wanderings of Rama and Sita and Lakshman, the pure dignity of women established and brotherliness without jealousy. So Rama's contribution is covered here. Here he equates Hanuman to mind, delighting in service, delighting in solitary meditation and uninterrupted repetition of God's name, shining arrows flying into the sun in the empyrean of heart. Each Rama answered by, "Here I am," love's dialogue. So Rama is responded to by, "Here am I." Very nice, right? Any questions, thoughts? Let's keep going. After Krishna, the singing of wait a minute, I think there was some notes here. Parvati is loving mother aspect of God, equals Zarathustra, equals Abraham, equals Rama, equals Krishna, equals Buddha. So he's equating God to man here. Equals Jesus, Muhammad, Sita, wife of, this is all for the Westerners, a chief disciple of Rama and Hanuman. Okay, let's continue. After Krishna, the singing of Vyasa meditated and composed in exact likeness of his acts of love. So, the Bhagavad Gita, the singing recitations of the saints, Iliad, Odyssey, Edda, although not written down until by Simon the Wise, song of his flute for the first time in the hearts of the Northmen, song self-existent, Moinuddin Chisti, magic song capable of lighting lights, Tansen. Mirabai singing her way to God. After Krishna, the sadhana of dance demonstrated by David, Jalaluddin, Chaitanya, Tukaram. Half the world dancing in the gopis' footsteps. Half the world listening for the notes of his flute, dividing them into ragas and modes and scales, arranging them into melody offerings. After Krishna, Sappho, Ambrose, Kavali, bhajan, and flamenco. So I think this is just a listing of all the artists that he approves of. So Francis has made his own list, right? So many of these we recognize, especially the ones either Sufi or Indian. Moinuddin Chishti, Tansen and lighting of his lights through singing. Mirabai is singing her way to God after Krishna. The the dance as an art form by David. David, I don't know which David he's referring to, but Jalaluddin, Chaitanya, and Tukaram, and then half the world dancing in Gopi's footsteps. Then different kinds of music, ragas, and modes. So it's just about the global art. After Buddha, men loving solitude. Unless a man set his heart in order, he can in no wise establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. Hence, Saraputti, hence Anuradhapura, hence Tang Pine painting and poetry, and New Heng, the 33rd in direct descent, tearing up scriptures, and along with other Zen men, delighting in caricaturing one another, banishing solemnity, but taking the job seriously. Shang waiting out in the snow for a week for interview with his lordship Bodhidharma, and then sending in his right hand. After Buddha, no, and tea drinking, and the proper way to sweep a path. And Marpa, that translates in his old age, tramping across the hills for the shortcut doctrine, and it demonstrated by Topaga in the wilderness. After Buddha, the clear reasoning of Socrates and Shankaracharya to break the back of a Buddhism not taught by Buddha and raise again the banner of I am God. Prajnana Paramita Hridya Sutra. So he talks about the Buddhic Buddha Advent, I guess. Now, here he's talking about in the end what Buddhism has not taught. And I think that's a post Buddhism sutra, which is Prajnana Paramita Hridaya Sutra, which brings back the concept of I am God, which Buddhism stopped short of, right? So we know that. So, yeah. And he's talking about the pieces of art after Buddha, and, there is episodes that he's talking about Shang, no, and tree dinking, and the proper way to sweep a path. These are all obviously Buddhist stories and references that are there in Buddhist doctrine. Yeah. There any notes here? Kavali, the traditional singing, bhajan, songs in praise of God in his avataric form. Kavali, the traditional singing of Sufis, those who follow the Islamic esoteric method, in which the states of the lover in relation to the beloved are expressed. The songs often use the texts of the great Sufi masters like Hafiz or being paraphrases of them. This form of singing is still alive and flourishing in India, and even to a Western ear, after a little acquaintance, is most appealing. Bhajan is songs in praise of God in his avataric form, Hindu, flamenco, traditional Spanish, gypsy form of singing. Anuradhapura. Anuradhapura is used throughout to designate the marvelous rendering of Buddha in stone at Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka. Hui Neng or Wei Lang, the 33rd Patriarch of China, in direct spiritual a descent from Sakyamuni Buddha according to the Zen school. See the Sutra of Wei Lang or Hui Neng. It's translated by Wong Mon Lam, new edition by Christmas Humphreys. Zen, a Japanese word derived through Chinese from Sanskrit dhyana, meditation, called by Zen masters themselves the sudden method, the method based on absolute surrenderance and obedience to one's master or spiritual guide. Zen, Sufism, and Vedantism are really different flavors of this method. And then Shang, bright young man who tramped across China to meet Bodhidharma. After waiting outside in the snow for a week for an interview, sent in his right hand to show that he was really in earnest. Or that's what is explained as that sent his right hand. Bodhidharma, the Indian master, the 28th in line from Buddha and the first patriarch of China. No, the traditional classical drama of Japan. See No or Accomplishment by E. Fenolosa. Tea drinking, again. Topaga, great sorcerer. There's a reference for Milarepa as well. Shankaracharya, I am God, Buddha, in his teaching confined himself to explaining only the bliss aspect of reality and said nothing about the power knowledge aspects. Consequently, he explained the spiritual path only as far as nirvana, passing away. That is, what which one takes to be oneself. That aggregate of impressions, the experiencing of which causes one to assert, I am a man or a woman, rich or poor, strong or weak, bright or dull, and so forth, must pass away, must be annihilated. Buddhism took this self to mean self, Paramatma, God, the unborn, the undying one, existence without a second, and declared that Buddha thought that this self had no existence. Buddha, being this self, could not possibly have thought that self did not exist. That he chose to enlighten his disciples regarding the path only as far as nirvana, which state is inevitably followed by nirvikalpa, affirmation that I am God, is not our affair. The point is the fact that a teacher, for reasons of his own, does not include a particular aspect of further degree. In this case, a further state of consciousness cannot in itself be taken as his denial of the existence of that aspect or degree. It was the mission of Shankaracharya to counteract this false teaching, which was not Buddha's and which had bred a widespread atheism, and he had no hesitancy in revealing the facts of the ultimate goal. In fact, Nirvikalpa, or I am God, state was the basis and conclusion of his teaching. Atma, individual self, is Paramatma. So that's the Prajnana Paramita Hridaya Sutra. Next one. Intelligence, wisdom, knowledge is Pragya. Upper merit, Mita is basically limit. So Aparimita, limitless. Hridaya, heart, and Sutra is scripture. And what it is a thread which one is drawn along the path to reality. The whole word might be rendered as the heart doctrine, the practice of which one obtains insight into the infinite. Okay. Okay. Let's go to the sixth stanza. Please jump in if there's any thoughts or questions. After Jesus,
Yes, go ahead.
so after Jesus, John writing perfect poetry, and Peter made worthy and altogether lovely through terrible remorse of denial, to whom M. Angelo and company made a monstrous monument. Now, the reference here is Michelangelo, whom he destroys, because Michelangelo was representative of the Renaissance. So, and he has said that Renaissance was kind of a sad moment where the spirit left God, right? So that's what Francis says. The Egyptian and Syrian deserts carpeted with flowers, the 7 golden odes of Imr al-Qais, even though Guide to Hell and Co. And Kailas frescoes. After Jesus, son of fourth heaven, plowshared through the garbage tip of Rome, short work span came Muhammad. After Muhammad, the pure brothers, masters of heart, Sahib Edil, and the whole linked flood of lovely singers in continuance after Krishna. Abu Bakr, Ali, Ibn Arabi, Junaid, Attar, Abu Said, Hafiz, Jalaluddin, Chrétien de Troyes, Daniel, Ramon Lull, St. John of the Cross, down to present cabals at the Baba Sehwas singing to Baba. So the bottom part is just reading of the names of famous singers after Krishna, he says. But basically, they are across the various traditions: Sufi, I think French or Christian with the names. And of course, he also adds the Baba Sahwas, right? So here, I think the only point that's being made of is he's saying that these things were monstrous. Michelangelo and even Kailas frescoes. Let's see if there's any notes here quickly. Desert Fathers, he says, refer that. Seven Odes translated. This is again a reference. Kailas fresco. He's referring to Ellora near Aurangabad. There are some 30 man-made caves filled with Buddhist, Jain, and Saivite sculpture. The glory of them all is a complete and large temple cut into the hillside of solid stone. There is no portion of it where the stone has been laid on stone. It is all cut out of the one body of stone. On its walls and on the walls of the galleries flanking it, the life story of Shiva has been cut. The general plan or shape of it is modeled on the shape of Mount Kailash. This, together with it being the abode of Shiva, gives its name Kailash Temple. So that's Kailash frescoes. And yeah, he's given references here. Fourth heaven, Matnavi. So we don't know what that is. Abu Bakr, charge man. Oh, he's a charge man of Muhammad in the sense as Peter was to Jesus. Ali, the third in line from Muhammad. Ibn Arabi, Attar, and Abu Said are Sufi masters. For Attar, see book reference. And Cretin de Croix is published in Everyman's Library, Spirit of Romance, Ezra Pound. Yeah, I think Ramon Lull, his Blankerna is translated. Okay. Ramon Lull was the last name here. Okay. After Muhammad, establisher of democracy, the cultivation of the heart doctrine was again easy, and men could easily love men. Re-establishment of the sharing companionship of the early Christians and carried through to the time of the great Assisian lover, who, however, was still calling Muhammad by his former name of Jesus. Chartres, Granada, the wandering scholars, pure line of Muhammad's gentleness and generosity, singing as of great bells, a rhythm of God in the hearts of men, as in the morning of stars, and men when the night fled. Stone laid on stone with reverence and care, carved images of Jesus and Krishna in stone and wood. In their image, men great in kingship and vassalage learned in the true scripture of love. So Francis keeps using the term democracy to associate Muhammad, the creator or the person who made men among men, and this helped define how they should live with each other. That's the way he describes Muhammad. In this para, it's more about what are the art that followed after Muhammad and Krishna. I think that's what it is. He refers to Francis of Assisi and who he says was calling Muhammad by his former name of Jesus, because he recognized that Francis of Assisi was, of course, a perfect master. So he recognized the true nature of Muhammad and Jesus, that is, both are the same, and hence who was still calling Muhammad by his former name of Jesus, says Francis. Right. And on page 94, we have to go to Khizr. Okay, quick pause. Any questions? Any thoughts?
The reference to Muhammad and democracy, how it is uh, linked up, I don't know the story behind
Yeah, I don't know
why
much
he is
too,
always.
but the only thing I can think of is the body of literature that has been created after Muhammad and during Muhammad. In fact, the Quran itself is supposed to have been listened, orally received by him from God, and then it was copied out or written up, right? But after that, a lot of work has gone into writing up law, right? So it's the
Mm.
early Sharia which determines how people are supposed to interact with each other. And he spent a lot of time organizing that and organizing the tribes and organizing the people from just blindly fighting and killing each other. So he's the men among men who helped people decide how people should live with each other. So I think that's what it is, unless there's more to it. Sharia,
Yes,
I think, is
that
the
makes
biggest reason. Yeah, Sharia is the biggest reason. So Sharia is a jurisprudence that started from God or started from Muhammad and has survived. Muhammad is just, I mean, in the religious sense, is just the prophet who heard the message and, helped lead some of the things, define some of the things. And the world, the Muslim world, follows what Muhammad did. So, what Muhammad wrote and what Muhammad did is the two things.
yes.
And they just follow that, yeah. So, let's continue. Get to Khizr now. Men who were not afraid to become blind in their seeing and deaf in their hearing, and trust that a Khizr would guide their feet in the world and instruct them in the way of knowledge and song. For unless a man becomes blind, he shall not have bright eyed sight to trace out the lineaments of love. Avatar's true form, the sort of sight which enabled Demodocus to follow Odysseus and Valmiki, Rama's journey. Learned men able to read hearts and the signs of God in the wind, in the fire, in the green, I think you have to mute, in the green earth, capable of writing the word love into the work of their hands, their swordsmanship and plowing, their pots in which they drew water and cooked their food and offered sacrifice to God. So he says only a few people like Valmiki and Demodocus understood this true nature of the love and followed that love and actually wrote about it. Learned men able to read hearts and the signs of God in the wind, in the fire, in the green earth, capable of writing the word love into the work of their hands, their swordsmanship and plowing, their pots in which they drew water and cooked and offered sacrifice to God. So everywhere they are able to bring God into it, and those were the real learned men, right? The Dark Ages, okay, the Khizr note and anything else. Khizr, in the Sufi tradition, a timeless person, keeper of the waters of knowledge, who appears to special devotees throughout the ages, the master of Moses, the Islamic mysticism, and Kashf al Majhub, Demodocus, the blind bard at the court of King Alcinous, again in Odyssey. Okay. The Dark Ages were the ages of light. The Renaissance was the twilight of our present black night of materialism. So Francis's take, like we said, he's been very critical of Renaissance. So he says the Dark Ages were still with light because people loved God, people focused on God, and they did not lose sight of God, and the spirit was still in domination. Once Renaissance set in, he says that was the beginning of materialism. He uses the word Renaissance as the twilight of our present black night of materialism. Once men burnt their desires in the sacred fire of devotion and austerity, made lovely their lives in his mold, measured the reach of their hands and the range of their speech by his word, then purely sang in words and notes and stone, Avatar's deeds, thus pleasing God with works in likeness of his own creativeness. Then men forgot that by association with saints, all filth is removed. By association with saints, the face becomes bright. By association with saints, pride is effaced. By association with saints, divine knowledge is revealed. That one instant in the company of a saint is better than 100 years of penances and prayers. So, continues on that theme, pretty simple and straightforward. The Dark Ages were the ages of light. Then men denied the saint in them, and the saint in them died, and the line of the saints came to an end, and there were no channels by which the flow of truth could be reflected in men's lives. Renaissance, promise of freedom from two-dimensional form, vision of smokestacks behind the eyes, ears twitching in anticipation of symphony of machines, spirit took wings to the terra firma of colonization, to solid commodities sweated out of the labor energy of other people. Armies of bees standing in line, sweating out wax of cement and steel. Colonization, last reach of establishment of territories in space from which to dominate the whole earth. Very, very interesting way of describing modernity and what Renaissance did. By the way, Renaissance is the first time that perspective came to art, right? Perspective again. I was listening to Ward, and that's where I learned about this. I think it came back from my school history as well. So perspective is this idea of the 3D, the third dimension, and clarity on that in art, right? So Renaissance contribution was the third dimension and perspective, and that's what Francis says here in the big way. Renaissance promise of freedom from two-dimensional form, and then maybe he's beating up a couple of paintings here. Vision of smokestacks behind the eyes and ears twitching in anticipation of symphony of machines. He calls the musical instruments machines, and they're just making some symphony. Spirit took wings to the terra firma of colonization, to solid commodities sweated out of the labor energy of other people. He's talking about large buildings being built by cement and steel. It's like armies of bees. And colonization, establishment of territories in skyscrapers, which basically allows you to be on top and dominate the whole earth. Renaissance, power population expansion, possible by the sciences, lauded by the arts. Science, which once laid down the steps to self realization, art, which once sang God's likeness in the earth. Now, sciences, making machinery of exploitation. Now, arts, singing the virtues of despoliation. Forgotten conceptual verities, forgotten intuitional representation. The servants and devotees of truth became the tools and mouthpieces of gunmen. Your pride is to trace your descent from a robber baron, our greatest king, to trace his to a forest sage. Knights of the Middle Ages and heroes of the great ages now hired officers. The great bards and troubadours, now verse jinglers and journalists. So he continues on this journey of beating up all the arts and the changes that happen. Sciences, which now makes machinery of exploitation. Arts, singing the virtues of despoliation. Let's just look that word up. action of despoiling or the condition of being despoiled. Plunder. Okay. Plunder is more like it. So plunder, singing the virtues of plunder. Okay. So we have forgotten what is intuitional representation. We have forgotten conceptual verities about God and divinity, and we're just going down and it's the descent to a point where the avatar is required. Right. Let's see if there's any notes. Yeah, that's it. 95. Okay, now let's go to 12. The sun was setting over Sri Kailas. I bowed to the four directions, spread my tiger skin on the ice, planted my staff on the right, and cried victory to the Lord, my master. Then sat in Siddhasana, facing north, fixing his glorious image between my eyes. Cruel winds, bitter cold, snow up to my chest, but unbounded love defeated these enemies. On the third day, the Lord Dattatreya, in his physical form, came to me, picked me up as a child, and caressed me. Manas merged into Antakarna, Antakarna into Chitta, Chitta into Buddhi, into Ahankara, all into the Satchidananda of the Supreme Self. Obviously, this is not the first reference to this. I hope everybody remembers. It comes from the first book. The first, what's the name of the master or disciple here? It's Hamsa, right? We read about the Hamsa as well, where he has physical darshan of Lord Dattatreya after 3 days of intense meditation. Right, so these words are literally a repetition of that. Without the name of God, no man comes to that knowledge which is the true knowledge. Without Guru, no man can learn the name of God. Because Guru is the only God you'll ever see on this plate. Guru, God's act to men. Coming home along the river, I passed Sheikh Abul Fadl, who glanced at me out of the corner of his eye. I owe all my perfection to that one glance. Once men journeyed within themselves until they came to the source of energy and could control their passions. Now they journeyed outwardly in conquest of the earth. Once dug in their hearts to find the gold of self. Now in the earth for metals to make aeroplanes and bombs. Technique of former laid down by Zarathustra, Patanjali. Right. So I think there are some notes.
Yes.
Yeah. 95, your pride is Viveka. We have not come to that. See the holy mountain. So this is what we read earlier. But what is the your pride reference to Vivekananda? And he says that's in 522. What is 22? Line 22. Your pride is to trace your descent from a robber baron. Maybe this is a line by Vivekananda, most likely. Robber baron is a reference probably to, yep. No. Yeah, Swami Vivekananda, it says, but okay, so we'll figure that out. Without the name of God, yeah, we did this. We'll go to 14 now. We became enamored of travel, intoxicated with the sensation of movement. Let us hitchhike to another city. Let us go find more oil wells. Let us find oil in the ocean. Let us build an opera house. Let us organize more appreciation classes. Last year, 10,000. This year, 20,000 must be our goal. Let us build a big plane, a rocket plane, and go to the moon. We must go somewhere where we will not find ourselves. We were saying breakfast in London, lunch in Cairo. The Arctic route cuts off 2 hours. We said diesel instead of train. Diesel is faster than train. Jet is faster than plane. More time to consider the lily in another's heart, to watch the leaf bud and flower putting forth of our own. So just realizing and how we have just gone uh, into materialism with a vengeance, right? That's the phase post Renaissance. The skyscrapers of New York are the cathedrals of America. A cathedral is an aspiration, a glory, a peace, a silence reaching to the silence which is God. It is the vertical line from the horizontality of human limitation, to the dimensionless point of human divine mind, which is unlimitedness. The Shushumna of unfolding from the Mooladhara to the thousand-petaled lotus in the crown of the head. A cathedral is a line between man and God, studded with gems of adoration. You should go to New York. You should see culture stockpiled. You should see the herd of faces which don't smile, the crowd of eyes which don't laugh, the poor children of the rich being wheeled in Central Park, buttoned to the eyes from the weak sun. The skyscrapers of New York are beautiful in their reach to depth, lovely with red tears of undedicated labor. I think Francis didn't see what happened in the Middle East, right? So he would have been even more pained by the way labor was used in very harsh weather conditions to build those fancy uh, buildings, right? And he, of course, that's in the latter part. In the former part, he's talking about the, the comparison of the cathedral to the Ida Pingala and the Shushumna, right? So it's nothing but a manifestation of the energy flows in a body. And he says a cathedral is the line between man and God, studded with gems of adoration. The gems of adoration is like the chakras. So he basically says, he visualizes the cathedrals of New York to be something like godly, I mean, a divine representation of the uh, chakras, and the thousand petal lotus is nothing but the Sahasrara. Right. So Patanjali is yoga, and then okay, all right. Any thought?
The height of the cathedral, he is giving a imagery for that, some sort of movement from the ground to the heights
God.
of realization, something like that.
Correct. Something like that. But it goes on cathedral, so we'll hear a little more. A cathedral is a line in the azure decked with devotees' tears, a shaft of Shiva glorious in the rising sun. A people whose lives are lived in faith, who live their lives in their hearts and offer the work of their hands to the various God of God, wear their cathedrals lightly, as birds wear their burden of the morning, as Jetson Milarepa wore the jewel of illness presented to him by the Geshe's concubine. You should see an Indian village, How beautiful, God, are your villages. How exquisite are the flowers of children growing out of your dirt. How beautiful is dirt. The mania for cleanliness is the fury of those outside the enclosure of intimacy. They even garden in gloves. Maybe some of them wear them in bed.
Right.
So, so he says we have lost connectivity with the earth. We have lost connectivity with what is nature. And he's in awe of villages of India. And he says, we just come and see how beautiful it is. And we have got so obsessed with cleanliness, which is, he described the mania for cleanliness is the fury of those outside the enclosure of intimacy. So it's interesting. Let's continue. God is to be found in the heart of beauty. Beauty is dirt molded by the hands of the sun and vivified with his breath. Children and must seek dirt and in it discover their freedom. As in dust, Majnun found Laila. A must in his dirt is a challenge to God, a rose in dung challenging the sun. And the sun electrifies its face in the contours of its own energy, making ashamed all clean people who come near it. How lovely is dirt from which emerges the nightingale of a child's eyes. Dirt in which Krishna played, with which the child Eknath made images of God, with which Sri Shankaracharya demonstrated before the unbelievers the oneness of God, supremacy of Advaita over atheism. So he brings in the concept of earth in multiple different meanings or multiple stories and significance. Laila Majnun, children, Krishna playing with dirt, which is a story in itself, and the child Eknath making images of God in earth. I mean, using the earth, and then finally Shankaracharya, he says, demonstrated before the unbelievers the oneness of God. Right?
No, I think that Shankaracharya's image is pot and the earth both are the same. That concept. So pot is a say actual form, but if you
Symbolism,
go to the
symbolism.
root of
Correct,
the
correct.
form, it is the earth.
Nothing but earth. It's nothing but earth. Yeah. Even the Bible uses similar thing. It says
Ah,
dust to dust, ashes to
yes.
ashes. And in the Hindu, I mean, the Shankara, of course, uses the pot. Yeah, pot, earth to pot, and then back to earth. 97. There was something about the notes in 97. Majnun and Laila, classical Persian lovers. Eknath, again, Guru, lover of God. Advaita, one without second. He goes on about the West. The curse of the West is its great cities. The glory of India is its villages. When 80% of a people live in villages, you can't conquer the country. They only pay their taxes to a bloke with another name. When 80% of the people live in villages and take God's name and listen to Sankirtan, you may be sure of the continuance of the line of saints and that the perfect masters have picked that place to take birth in. When the majority of the people herd into the cities, you may be sure that no one any longer sings or dances or sees anything as it is, or finds the precise word to express the tone of the heart. When the majority and the red wind of pent violence shakes the atom plums of the tree. So, he paying a big tribute to India here. He pays a big
Yes.
tribute to India, and specifically why the masters pick India over and over again to come back, the perfect masters and Avatar. And a lot of it is to do with the villages and the way the people are simple. They're still doing their Sankirtan, and hence their connectivity is God with God is real and continuous. And there are a number of educated Indians who believe the West is a sort of Buddha lands of prosperity. They can even supply calorific data. But one wonders, did they, when they was getting their Western education, ever bother to drive around our slums or visit a shanty town or do a few weeks on a process bench or inquire into the fact that a bubble economy must expand or bust, and take note of the fact that the breath of the bubble is fear, and that so long as you keep making guns, you have full employment. It is an impressive sight to see giant jaws biting into the earth of ribbons of molten metal unwinding light, until you know that if the jaws lock or the ribbons snap, we face unbelievable famine. And if they go on biting and unwinding, we face certain destruction. So he's talking about the unbridled construction here. So if it keeps going on the way it goes on, we will go to a famine. And if they stop, and if they don't, then we face certain destruction, he says, because these jaws and ribbons, which are nothing but construction equipment, maybe the large excavators and cranes, right? Very nice visualization here about how we have lost touch with all the things which are normal and natural. And
The point which comes to my mind is about karma. So he is into the pinnacle of science of physics. Then he did all his say economic activity for say amassing wealth and material benefits and all that, and still goes to his village to seek solace.
hmm, no, yeah, perfect. Kaba, what do you think? Huh? Okay. The gentleman who commented irritably and apologetically on a farmer drawing water with bullocks instead of an engine, but of course he could not afford to buy one, had not heard the arithmetical answer of another farmer. I have 5 sons. Yes, with machinery, one son and myself could do the work. The other four could go into factories and make the machines so that one son and myself could do the work. Only a peasant could think of such a crazy answer. Or the high school headmaster who was confused because science was providing the statements of our great sages to be wrong. 90 elements, not 5. Apparently, hadn't read Vidagdha Shikala's questions on how many gods are there, and Yajnavalkya's answer that it all boils down to one god only. So he makes. So we'll just see if there's anything else here that we are supposed to catch up. Sankirtan is in the village that he talked about, and then next is page 100. But the young chap from Delhi was not confused. You needn't think we'll go communist or democratic, he said. We have got our own tradition of thousands of years of cooperation. He has also read the old books and loves the uniqueness of Krishna and knows his country's problems and is a disciple of the living master. And the bhajan singers who carry Baba's message from house to house are not confused, nor the boy with his oxen, nor the girls with their red earthen pitchers. Nor was the young airman confused or apologetic. He, who was a living flower of chivalry, courteous, brave, modest, extremely beautiful, a very perfection of young manhood, who always took God's name when he sat in the cockpit, and who, when his plane crashed, stood before Baba before the thing happened. There was something, yeah.
This stanza refers to some history or some which I don't know.
So
Young
there was
chap from
something.
Delhi.
So there was something in the WhatsApp groups just a few days back. The first part obviously is a historical reference. We may even try to do some research and figure out who this is, because he says he's a disciple of the living master. And he says we needn't think we'll go communist or democratic. So could it be Nehru? I don't know. Non-aligned was his pitch, right? So, but then that's communist or capitalist rather than communist or democratic. But we don't know. Anyway, the point I was thinking of for the second half was probably something from Lord Meher, right? One of the, I think Arnavas's cousin or nephew, or Erut's nephew, I think. One of Erut's nephews was a pilot and uh, died to a plane crash with Baba's name on his lips. So this sounds very much like that. I think his name was Noel.
Maybe something.
Yeah.
Any reference in the back for this?
Let's check. No.
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 Okay.
No. 22. Did you ever notice how haggard the women are getting? They have to put on their faces more often because there's no longer any men around. Did it ever occur to you that a woman needs a man more than space travel? They don't want such a terrible lot. A hovel for their bodies so long as it's clean, a house in their hearts to discover, to look around in delight and amazement, a place of security in which to have their babies. But by God, if you cheat them with a hovel of a heart, they will hate you with such a hate as will drive you to build bigger and bigger houses for their bodies. Faster and faster cars which float instead of clawing the road on the bends, faster and smoother planes because the hurt of their heart is beyond their endurance. So maybe a little bit of uh, the feministic growth that we saw and how they have been making progress on all sides, but then the progress is just about material goals. A hovel is just a small house. Yeah, so that's what he's saying. Have you ever stopped in the tracks of your progress and asked, who is this other person living with me? It would be too humiliating to find that fine brain, which can measure infinitesimal measurements and set armies hacking each other to pieces, is knowledgeless regarding that wonder called a woman. It takes a man who does nothing to know her, a man who will, for Christ's sake, stop jigging about like an imbecile, who will sit down and sweat on a pick and shovel or a rock drill in his own heart, who will, thread by thread, discard the filthy rags of himself, who will make a woman out of himself so that he can take her into himself. For only in himself will he ever know himself in her, that he is the veil of her, beyond which is the Son of the Son of God. So I think it's very clearly a stanza which brings about the relationship between man and woman, and the respect and position that we need to accord to women, and how we have to be able to see the divinity in them as well, right? And he gives that message, right? Because you love the indolence which you call progress, you made of her a play toy, first for your body, then for your intellect. Towards the first, you established the cult of the petite and robbed her of the ability to walk properly and caused her to bear her children in unnatural pain. Toward the second, you taught her to read the words of your jargons and made her believe they had meaning, so that her intellect became the shadow of your incompetence, and she could share your state into and she could share your stare into vacancy. Mothers of God, but when this man breaks his silence and speaks that word which is the husband of the heart, and the answer and the direction and the far goal, the spell of your tyranny will be broken, and and she she will remember the dawn and the first Adamic walking and companionship. So we get back the word, the reference to the word, and Baba's word, or in every avatar he uses the word as a prominent piece. So in the same way, we are seeing how word is important here, and we see how uh, we have bracketed women as material objects, he says, on the one hand, and second, we have also made them subservient to our intellect and our ideologies, men's ideologies, and then we have robbed her of the ability to be normal from a physical standpoint, because all this Western obsession with weight, being petite, right? So that's what is being talked about here. Um, yeah, I think there's something about Adamic in the notes. Faber, that's just a book reference. Hebraic tongue restored. Okay. Okay. We walk, but we are dead men who walk. We speak to one another across unbridgeable distance. We dance, but never know our partner. We sing without ever hearing the notes of our song. We pray, and since all prayer is answered, we spawn a new disease every year. We beget ourselves in lust and come into the world angry at our own act. We sleep in fear and awake in a bluster in order to dispel our fears. We search the stars for truth and dig into the earth to find being, and the eyes of our souls stare into the darkness of our walled hearts. We have mocked one another. Let us be friends and drink together and secretly put poison in each other's glass. We have been told perhaps that God has come into the world again and has smiled, another escapist. Or I heard a lunatic speaking. We chuckle. We will let off a big bomb. We will kill our children rather than abdicate our anger. So he says how the material world is all about selfishness, individual, individual, and individual. and we don't have any true friendships. We do not have any true relationships. And when anybody talks of God, we either call him an escapist or we say that he's a lunatic. This is so relevant even today. Okay. And the country of Adam, the place of any one Adam of us, easily expandable by any man with divine mind, that is shed of limitation, a human being person to the whole earth. But when men had turned their backs on the saints and the saint in them, they had to wave beat it and foot slog it or ride on horses, and knowing no longer the gods of gods, the gods, O man, they employed men to write prayers for them to mouth, to know God. That is, after the theologians had decided who exactly he was. But of course, it was Ares the blusterer whom they worshipped after changing name to Jehovah, which was a funny way of saying Joah, which is God in English. So maybe this is very, very specific to Jehovah's cult, right? Not even cult, I mean the grouping within the Christians. Okay. Ares they worshipped and sacrificed lovely Jesus on Ares' altar. Blood scarlet for cardinals, blood purple for kings, denied Jesus, arisen again as Muhammad, and painted pictures of a man they called Christ minding sheep and playing shepherd games, reviving the Roman cult, paying poets to write verses about it. Thus, Christ Ares' supreme muddlement, destruction of all the true values in art and living, the kings and the general herd of businessmen and workers, never quite sure which one was in their prayers, and the theologians swapping them around as suited the particular policy of the rulers. But the perfect masters and the saints guarded their lovely way of God, guarded art, and showed it secretly to a few, a little, not much having in mind the need of tempering its wind tempering its wind to shorn sheep. Aries is the the material side of focus, right? So Aries is represented here in that fashion. So he's saying that Aries they worshipped and sacrificed lovely Jesus, and again the shepherd and lamb ideology, which is what Jesus is wrongly classified and remembered more about, and not the lion that Francis thinks he was as an avatar, is what is brought out in this para as well. Aries, they worshipped, hated Jesus, the great ascetic, opposer of planned economy and settled way of life, terrible slayer of Rome, their pilgrimage, cunningly killed him again, denied his Muhammad, made him into a Christ, benevolent of their policy of trade expansion, decked him, avatar warrior of supreme majesty and loveliness, in cap and bells, supreme insolence, started first by Paul, chargeman, opposition of chargeman Peter, Paul, a Roman at heart, a soapbox orator who won the day of the church. But Peter's line was carried down by lovers of solitude successfully until Jesus appeared again in Arabia, similar to the 33 in China. 33, so I don't know whatever that is. Yeah, what is 33 in China? So, yeah, so here again, the focus is on Peter and how Peter betrayed Jesus, and that's what stood. That's really what people remember, right? So, oops, what happened?
It was not Peter who betrayed Jesus here. It was, I think, what's his name? Um, famous name, yeah. Who betrayed Jesus? Yeah,
You're right, you're
Peter
right. Peter
basically,
was
it's
number
not.
one. Peter was number one in the disciples. And he was a good guy.
He was basically, a lot of them abandoned Jesus in a sense, but it was the other chap. And there is a reason behind it. Actually, Jesus said that he was programmed to behave like that, even though he was one of the mandali of Jesus. I'll tell you who betrayed Jesus. That is a famous. Um, hold on.
John, Peter, it's a common name, but you're right, it's not Peter. Agreed.
Judas betrayed Jesus for
Judas,
30
Judas,
pieces of
Judas,
silver.
Judah.
Judas.
So instead of Jesus,
30
it's
pieces of
Judas.
silver, correct.
With a
Yeah.
kiss in front of the Roman soldiers. Later, the guilt-ridden Judas returns the bribe and commits suicide according to the Bible. Gospel of Judas, however, gives a different account. So there are so many other gospels, but this book that I'm reading about the masters of the East, there is there is a lot of stuff about Christ consciousness in that book. I found it very appealing, because there's like whatever Baba talked about Jesus in terms of crucifixion and all that. So it's really mentioned in this particular book. And there was another book that I also read called Jesus, My Autobiography, which was a channel, Jesus channel through this person and talked about his own life. But the reason is Jesus wanted to go through that process. And I think he also wanted to show I am not the body. And he also wanted to show about the Nirvikalpa Samadhi thing, because after 3 days, there is a resurrection of Jesus. Remember the cave where the stone was blocked? And he resurrects and he actually meets his apostles, but they still can't believe it because their degree of consciousness had not reached that level, according to this book, And and definitely he came to India and Kashmir, went to Burma and came back to Kashmir and dropped his body in Harwan. But the Judas part is also a kind of a pre-scripted thing that the prophet wanted to go through that kind of experience to show some spiritual significance of the whole thing, Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have a feeling maybe even Baba talks about Judas in that sense. He says that he had to do what he had to do. It was expected that Jesus is humiliated, is betrayed, and that's exactly what Judas did. So it's scripted totally.
Yeah, and
So how
also
did
that.
you find these books,
Huh?
these two books, and what got you started there?
Well,
Curious.
I think there is a divine intervention out there. It just, when I was in Santa Barbara with my American friend, in my bedroom, there was this book of the Masters. Okay. And I started reading it, and suddenly I realized, wow, this book is very interesting. So I asked my friend's wife what she told me, that somebody recommended that to her. So what I did was, it's an old book. It's a 1934 publication. So I saw that the first 4 volumes are available as a PDF, but the 5th and 6th volumes were published after that person died, that Spalding guy. Okay. These guys were traveling in India in 1894. Okay. And but then the other book, Jesus, My Autobiography, just came like that, it just manifested. And then I read the same lady's book, which has to do with the brilliant minds, so it has, she's channeled by John Lennon to Jerry Garcia to Einstein, and they talk about life in the other side. So I thought it's a good complement to when we are reading reincarnation and karma, So
Sure.
I don't even ask, even
I
these things.
saw the message, but I didn't read the book yet.
Yeah, these things just manifest by itself when you're ready, and that's what happened to me actually. So I believe that, but I'll tell you one thing, that this book tells you, Jesus, the autobiography, that you have to always keep your thought process at a higher level. Your vibration should be at a higher level. And what happens is when you keep it at a higher level, the guardian angels actually give you messages. So whenever you come up with some new insights or new intuition, it is not you doing. It is actually the message that is being communicated by the higher spirits through you, and you're able to express it. So never take any what do you say that I did it, I found this insight. It's not. It comes to you when you're ready. So the moral of the story is that since we are all divine, we just have to be in that vibrational level. And whenever we feel down and out, we should try to bring ourselves to that level, because it's again sanskaras, right? So so there were some beautiful insights in those. If you read those books, you'll find it very interesting.
Sure. When I get some time. Are they very big ones?
Yes, he talked in volumes.
Yeah, but then the volumes could be small. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
Cool. So we are almost out of time. So let's, on that note, also wrap up and come back.
Where are we
next
near
week.
the end? Is it?
Yeah, we are. I think down to no, but there are quite a few parts here. I think I stopped sharing, but I think there are. Let me just tell you where it is.
Because the references stop around 102 page.
Okay, so where we are is we are here, okay, or 103. We're in 103, and I think the book has
okay
172, 40. Yeah, but then the stanzas end here. Yeah, this is the notes. So you're talking 160. There's another 50 pages.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Have a great Sunday and a week ahead. Let's catch up soon. And Kama, I owe some time with you on the collaboration. I will do that.
When do we finish, boss? Today we got to do it. Let's finish it now.
Done. Huh? No, I have to get off now. I will call you. We will finish it. Paka.
Today, huh?
आज करेंगे.
Okay.
आज करेंगे. चलो, take care. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.